Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd.
Thanks, Brad. As a business and healthcare law firm, we are often immersed in the heavy details of a particular issue or project. It's beneficial, if not mandatory, to ever so often take a step back and evaluate the bigger picture. This season's theme is Zoom Out. We have all been immersed in the life of a global pandemic, and no, this is not about using Zoom, but we're going to make sure with each story that we at least take a step back, look at the issue and how the pandemic has impacted our lives.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited for our audience today for this episode. We have this entrepreneur extraordinary joining us today, a background with many different industries, from healthcare to restaurants, and all with the means to try to help a business and a franchise owner really realize their dream of independence and, more importantly, of freedom.
And I'm really excited, too. I know you know this, Brad, but I actually have a connection to the franchise world. My in-laws, Steve and Sue Solons, were McDonald's owner-operators throughout their career and sold out several years ago. So always have a soft spot in my heart for this business sector. And but speaking of franchises, Brad, do you know when franchising began?
I do, and only because right before we started the episode, you and I had a sidebar on this. It started in the 1950s and basically really picked up steam in the 60s.
Okay, Brad, you get a figurative gold star. And no, I did not get some actual stickers that you could put on.
Oh, boo.
I know. According to franchising.com, one of the early franchise behemoths, McDonald's, speaking of, opened 1,000 units in just 10 years. Midas Muffler reached 400 locations. Holiday Inn grew to 1,000 locations. And Budget Rental Car topped 500, all during the same period.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. It must have been an amazing time, that beginning of it, to really, as you said, start those franchises.
Well, actually, in the early 60s, it was more of an amazing time to sell a franchise, not so much to buy one. As with many aspects of sales, many major companies were only focused on selling the next franchise, but not on the supporting and operating side of making one successful. And so there was a lot of bad outcomes, and based on this and lawsuits and state actions, the Federal Trade Commission issued franchise rules, which established minimum disclosure requirements throughout the country.
Yeah, and this, if you really look into the franchise history, this really helps kind of slow down franchising in the 80s and 90s, because a lot of people were concerned about how to put together a correct FDD or franchise disclosure document. And so people who were doing the franchises really need to start focusing on operating and developing great processes. And those who listened to our podcast in the past would have known that, this goes back to something we always talk about, is the form must match the substance. So if the entire model doesn't have the right operations team in place, it's just going to collapse.
So true. And now with over 3,000 franchisors operating in the U.S., it's vital, no matter what industry, that you partner with the correct franchise and the correct persons to help develop the model.
Totally agree, Michael. And that's why today we have the special guest to give us insight on running that successful franchise. Michael, please bring in our special guest.
Today we have our friend, Randy Stepp. Randy has worn many hats. He's the principal and chief operating officer of Apex Franchise Development Group. He's the chief administrative officer and franchise development for Romeo's Pizza. He is currently the chief operating officer for VO Med Spa, Romeo's Pizza area representative, and senior franchise and business development consultant for Renaissance Leadership Group. Randy received his MBA from Case Western Reserve University, Weatherhead School of Management, and multiple degrees from Ashland University, including a doctorate in leadership, master's degree in administration, bachelor's in education, and probably what he wears most proudly is he is a member of Access Plus with ByrdAdatto. Welcome, man. Thanks for coming, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I do have to clarify one point. I'm no longer the Chief Administrative Officer with Romeo's Pizza. That was a position that I held actually, early on in my experience in the franchise world. My partners, a couple of my partners in VO MedSpa, VO Franchise Group, actually own Romeo's Pizza. So what happened is they purchased Romeo's Pizza about 6 years ago, asked me to come in as a chief administrative officer and build their operational systems to help create that foundation for franchising. And I had the fortune of learning all about franchising through that process, how complex it was and how important it was, to your point, Michael, earlier, in supporting the franchisees in their growth and development as they looked to build their business.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, first off, glad for the clarification, Randy. Again, glad you could join us. But that leads me right to really my first question. I think the audience is going to understand is kind of what brought you into working with clients in the franchise world.
So when I was with Romeo's, we worked very hard to create a structure that was operationally sound. And when you think about what it takes to be operationally sound, it's about creating systems and processes that can be replicated consistently and understood by everyone in the business. We did that for Romeo's, and as a result of that, Romeo's, when it was purchased by Ryan Rose and Robert Strickland about 6 years ago or so, Romeo's went from approximately 30 open locations to literally none in development to where they are today, which is 50 open locations and nearly 200 in development.
Wow.
So they made a leap. The leap was made because they proved out the business model through the development of highly structured systems and processes. Through that experience, we learned that we could help entrepreneurs be successful through a franchise model. So we created what is known as Apex Franchise Development Group, which myself, Bob Strickland, Ryan Rose, and Ryan Rayo are all partners in. And we went on a search. And the search was, let's find these concepts that might only have one or two locations that have the potential to be franchised. And when I say potential, it means they're scalable and there is a demand. People want those services, those products that they offer. And that's how we eventually found what is now VO MedSpa.
That's amazing. So talk about like what are the disciplines that the four of you kind of bring that help you kind of see what good candidates are and then how to actually implement scaling them.
So what we look for is a business that is fundamentally sound. So when you think about business today, I think many people believe that they have to come up with some grandiose idea, some new innovation, something that is completely different than what's out there. And I would argue that you really just need to find a business model that is strong. It doesn't have to be a reinvention of the wheel. A good friend of mine is one of the founders of this fitness brand that glows orange every day, every night.
Is there a theory behind that glowing?
There is a theory behind it. That 10 years ago, when they were looking at this as a franchise model, they basically had the same idea that we do today. They were a company, he and his partner, that looked for concepts that they could scale and franchise. Well, think about fitness. Think about what they do. If I came to you today and said, hey, I have this idea. It's a fitness concept. We're going to use treadmills, rowers, TRX bands, and dumbbells. You might look at me and say, okay, how are you different than everybody else out there? What they did is they made themselves different. They took tried and true ideas, took fitness concepts that worked, that were proven to work, got results, and they developed their own processes and systems around it. They incorporated technology and incorporated a phenomenal experience. And today, as a result, that's one of the largest, and certainly one of the most sought after brands in the country.
And so when you see like a VO, are those things in place, or do you see how it could be different, how it could do something that would set itself apart?
So with VO, what happened there is we, Apex Franchise Development Group, took on about 6 or 8 clients, and we were working with them. This is pre-COVID era, working with them on developing their systems and processes, creating their franchise disclosure documents, their legal agreements, and just helping them develop their operations manuals and so forth. As a result of that, the clients that we brought on were clients that were in spaces that were in industries that had a trajectory of growth. So when you think about the medical spa industry, the growth trajectory 3 years ago, when we took on this little one location concept in Strongsville, Ohio called Skin Deep Medi Spa, we took it from where it was at about $1 million a year, and within about a year or so, brought it to 2.25 million through the implementation of systems and processes and foundational operating structures. So for us, what we do is we look at the concept and we say, is this a viable concept, and can it be scaled? And if it can, we also look at the ownership structure. And we were fortunate enough that the founder of Skin Deep Medi Spa, Joe Stanisek, he was willing and able to give up control, which most entrepreneurs struggle with, and allow us to come in and build the systems and structures to grow VO Med Spa to where it is today. We even had to change the name because, as you can imagine, intellectual property around Skin Deep is very difficult to acquire. So we changed the name and ended up changing some of the service offerings, because one of the most important things you can do is develop your core values, build your business around core values. And that's something that we help all of these entrepreneurs do, is organizational development and core value vision creation.
And following up on that, Randy, clearly you have this vision of how when you come into a place, how you obviously value it. You then figure out what are the right people there, and you put the processes in there. And when Michael first introduced you, he talked about all the education that you had. So going back to, based on your education, who are some of the authors or books that you've read that inspired you to have this knowledge base for our audience as who's trying to figure out? I mean, obviously they can always hire Randy, but besides that, what are the other things that you use as resources?
So for me, education is the key to success. When we talk about VO Med Spa and VO Med Spa's growth and development, it hinges upon education. When people talk about sales, they talk about revenue. You can try your hardest to drive revenue through marketing, but one of the best ways to drive revenue is through educating your team, and be it on products that you offer, services that you offer, or the systems and processes that you engage in. Education is the key. So for me, when I was going through my educational process, moving through various degrees, what really hit me is when I became an educator and started to learn how people learn, and then I learned how they gained confidence from learning. With confidence comes many things, and the biggest thing is the reaching of your full potential. And so when we educate our team members, think of an esthetician. When we educate them on all the products and services that we offer, and they can speak about it more confidently, they're better able to make recommendations that meet the needs of the person in front of them. And that's really what VO is all about. It's about meeting the needs of the person in front of them and getting the results that they're after. If we don't get the results and meet their needs, we are failing our customers. And that is really what we build our business around. And so when I look at myself and I say, what brought me to the business world, it was really a book written years ago by a gentleman by the name of Jim Collins called Good to Great. And if you look today at a book that really drives what I do operationally, it would be Traction, written by Gino Wickman. And if you look at Good to Great, you look at Traction, what Gino Wickman did is he took the concepts, theories, the research that was found by Jim Collins in Good to Great, and he made it applicable today. And if you follow Traction, the entrepreneurial operating system, which is very difficult to do because you have to be very disciplined, I promise you, you will be successful. And that's how we build our businesses that we work in today. That's how Romeo's Pizza is built. That's how VO Med Spa is built. And that's how I work with franchisees to build their businesses, is to follow that Traction model.
Yeah, I love that you started with the education piece. It goes back to we at our firm we're continuous learners. We're always trying to understand things. And I think those who realize, and I think you and I have talked about this before, but those books like Good to Great have been, and other ones that we've actually talked about in other podcasts that we've read that really were inspired us to be better at what we did. And that's just because I think, as you said, if you're educating yourself, and more importantly, what you also said, and bringing your team with you and educating them, that's going to help grow everyone. That's going to allow everyone to succeed together.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I would tell you that one of the great lines in Good to Great is good is the enemy of great, meaning that people tend to settle on good is good enough. And Jim Collins would argue that, you know what, it doesn't take that much more to be great. And sometimes being great is educating your team, holding them accountable to the systems and processes in place, and just pausing and taking your time to hire the right people. Sometimes, especially today, in a post-pandemic world where it seems like it is the hardest thing to do is hire people, having the discipline to pause and hire the right person is one of the biggest things you can do as an entrepreneur.
Totally agree with that.
Well, I love just music to my ears hearing you just focus on business fundamentals. I mean, that's education and training, and just the focus on these basic principles are fantastic. And I think if I remember right, I think I read Traction several years ago. Is that the book that has the big, hairy, audacious plan for setting your vision? Does that ring a bell?
Very, very audacious goal. That would actually go back to Good to Great. And Gino Wickman then took that concept a step further to say, hey, you have to have a vision for where you're going, and everybody has to buy into that vision. You have to have your core values in place, and people have to understand those core values. And then you have to hire the right people, and those people have to GWC, get it, want it, and are capable of doing it.
Yep. Well, let's shift a little bit, Randy. And you, as you said when we started this off, you're in two completely different industries: the restaurant industry and the healthcare industry, and both do have a service element to it. But as you dove into this industry, what are some of the things that actually surprised you as you learned more about them?
What surprised me about the restaurant industry, and it led me to a level of respect for people who work in and own restaurant businesses, it is a grind. It is hard work every single day. And if you're not thick-skinned enough and willing to work, it is not the industry for you. Medical spa, as you know better than anyone, it is a very complex business. And if you don't appreciate and respect the complexity of a medical spa, you need not get into it because it'll eat you alive. When you look at VO Med Spa, we essentially have 5 lanes of business under one roof. We have a retail side, we have the body contouring side, we have a wellness side, we have the spa services side, and then we have the heavily regulated medical side, which covers the injectables and fillers and threads and et cetera. That's not for the faint of heart. And you have then a whole process of meeting the needs of the people in front of you, getting the results they demand, and doing it in a way that provides an exceptional experience. That is a tough business model to get your arms around if you're not appreciative of it.
And if you, to add a little complexity to what you do, you have all of those things, and you're folding that into a franchise model, which has its own set of of things that you need to know. And so for our audience who may be considering opening a franchise, what are some of the concepts you would recommend they consider?
Well, certainly the medical supply industry is one that the trajectory is insane. It is growing exponentially. It seems like every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's an industry that certainly is strong. However, I do believe that is an industry that over time is going to settle into about 3 or 4 big franchise players across the country. And the reason for that is similar to what happened to the medical industry as a whole. If you think about hospitals and how, or even those local physicians, that family practitioner that we used to go to. I'm certainly much older than the two of you, but that has changed. That model has changed. It's changed not because corporate America came in and wanted to take it over and be highly profitable. It changed because we learned over time that these bigger entities had the resources to offer the services and the treatments and the education and buy the equipment necessary to provide great healthcare. And these independent practitioners just didn't have that available to them to offer that same level of healthcare. And so when you look at what was better for the person in front of them, it was having the resources available to provide the best medicine possible. And I think that same thing's going to happen in the medical supply industry, where the franchise organizations that evolve are going to be able to offer products and services that a one-off or two-off location might not be able to offer. So I think you're going to see that settle in. I still think health and wellness is a huge industry that is poised to be developed. I do believe that more and more we're going to see people choosing healthier and healthier lives, and they're going to seek out more and more options that meet them where they want to go. Those are great industries. I still think that restaurant industry is a great industry. But again, I'm going to go back to the one thing that ties everything together, and that's experience. And if you think about medical spas, you think about a carry-out delivery pizza, you think about fitness, anybody can buy treadmills, anybody can buy rowers, anybody can buy a pizza oven. It's the experience you create and the service that's there that differentiates you beyond your products and services.
Absolutely. And I think, you've answered a lot of the stuff that hopefully the audience heard, because there's so many good nuggets in there that so far. I was going to say, if you had once something's operational, what's the biggest mistake you see a franchisee make, or a franchise, once they are operational?
The biggest mistake, so once you open a business, revenue is king, right? You have to push revenue hard to be able to survive. It's just a matter of survival. Once you're up and running, it is accountability for executing upon the systems and processes that you put in place to get you where you want to be in the first place. If you don't hold yourself accountable for staying true to your foundation, you're not going to succeed long term. Mm-hmm. And the biggest mistake I see is that the owners, the entrepreneurs, the franchisees don't stay involved in the businesses that they start. And over time, they start to fall apart because they lose connection. And it all comes back to foundational systems, operational systems, and processes.
That's amazing. Randy, thank you so much for being generous with your time today. We're grateful to have you with us on the Legal 1-2-3s with ByrdAdatto. We're going to say goodbye, go into commercial, and on the other side, Brad and I will share any legal insights from today's episode.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
Welcome back to Legal 1-2-3s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. Michael, it was great to spend some time with Randy hearing how the formula that he's kind of put together to help people find their success. And you can tell what an entrepreneur he was. But, as part of our Zoom Out theme, let's talk about, bigger pictures of franchises.
I think the first disclaimer we should add is that we're not franchise attorneys. The franchise world is heavily regulated, kind of like our healthcare world, and so it's getting it, as Randy said, it's not for the faint of heart. You're entering into two heavily regulated fields to be a franchise in the medical space. But we've worked with a ton of franchises because you have both disciplines that are needed, and so we've worked with a ton of franchise attorneys over the years. Yeah,
and because of that, we've had the opportunity to review a ton of FDDs for our clients over the years, add our own comments, especially on the healthcare regulation deals, and sometimes even update the business models to be detailed out in the FDDs.
Okay, Brad, we almost made it through an entire episode without a vocabulary word, but I think we need to talk about FDD because it sounds like it could be problematic. Sounds like an illness, but we'll clarify that. For the audience that does not know, an FDD means a franchise disclosure document. It is a legal disclosure document that must be given to individuals interested in buying a United States franchise as part of the whole pre-sale due diligence process. The document contains a ton of information essential to helping the franchisees understand what they're buying. And we noted earlier in this episode that the Federal Trade Commission started requiring franchises to provide additional details to potential franchisees, and this is ultimately what is in an FDD.
Yeah. Thanks for the additional background, Michael. And I think the best way I've described before is similar to a private offering. You're really basically showing your underwear drawer to someone to make sure they understand what they're getting them into. But, often when we are working with with our franchise clients, again, we're not working on the franchise side of it. We spend a lot of time with them, whiteboarding out their actual model to actually understand the potential healthcare implications. And this could be as simple as identifying certain laws that we've talked about, like corporate practice of medicine or good faith exams, or even getting much more complicated or complex, diving into the federal laws and how that's going to impact the actual franchise sale, or the other conversations that we're having right now, which is they're getting ready to do an M&A deal, and they want to figure out how to structure it correctly or get ready to go franchise themselves. So no matter what part it is, having that step back, as you said, the zoom out piece is very important to really understand their model.
Yeah, and just think about Randy talking, and he just had such a way of talking about the disciplines that go with traditional business. And imagine following Randy's advice, but then not knowing that what you are doing when you're building out your model is non-compliant, and how that could end up causing some major problems. And so, as we've talked about in other episodes, not everyone in some states can own a medical spa. So if you have a franchise offering that would impact, who can own it, then you got to understand the model so that you can get the people you're looking for. And then you expand that to staffing. And so understanding the compliance piece in the franchise process is so important.
Yeah, Michael, we're almost out of time for this episode. What I loved what Randy said on that, he really did take a good step back and really talk about the franchise industry, and especially in the medical industry, what he sees happening. So I'm going to ask you basically the same thing that Randy said when we take a zoom out here. Where do you see the franchise growth in the medical industry?
Well, I think you have two things where the franchise world is going to grow. One is going to be people that are looking to scale med spa. So people have this idea, they want to figure out how to scale it, and they're drawn to this concept, the model of the franchise world. And so they may have the understanding of the healthcare world, but they need to learn that and go through that process.
Yep.
And then the flip side is franchisees are their own animal from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah, totally.
And they will bounce industries. And if they see that the medical spa space, as Randy alluded to, is one that's attractive. You're going to have people that are disciplined in the franchise world and successful in the franchise world want to break into the med spa world. And so they're going to come at it from that angle and have to learn all the compliance pieces.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement. I guess this goes back to where you started off this episode, where you were talking about franchises can be great. As you said, your father-in-law owning McDonald's. It's a great way for people to make business, to be successful in business. But it goes back to where Randy was very clear, is that you have to have great operational processes put in place. And, anyone can flip a burger, anyone can run on a treadmill but putting all those together to make it consistent in the way that everyone understands they'll always receive it, that's the important piece of a good franchise. Well, Michael, that's all the time we have today. So join us next week on September 29th when we actually preview Season 6 of the podcast, Michael.
Wow.
Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.